In September 1860, in less than 20 days, Umbria and the Marche changed their destiny forever. It was a rapid, unyielding, and decisive military campaign. But above all, it was a human story, shaped by men on the march, by choices that could not be undone, by ideals standing in direct opposition. This is not merely the account of a territorial conquest. It is the story of a collapse, the dissolution of the temporal authority of the Church. And it is also the story of a beginning, the emergence of modern Italy. The columns of the Sardinian army advanced through valleys, rolling hills, and the rugged ridges of the Apennines with a determination that allowed no hesitation. Guided by generals Manfredo Fanti and Enrico Cialdini, they presented themselves as a force of order, as a necessary intervention in territories portrayed as unable to govern themselves and described, according to the political narratives of the time, as marked by disorder and by the harsh conduct of papal troops. This framing was not merely military but ideological, intended to legitimize action and to prepare public opinion for a decisive break with the past.
Opposing them stood an army unlike any other in Europe at the time, profoundly international in its composition. French nobles, Belgian volunteers, Irish peasants, Swiss officers, and German recruits converged from across the continent to defend the Pope and what he symbolized. They did not see themselves as hired soldiers, but as participants in a mission of faith, driven by spiritual commitment and by loyalty to an order they believed was under existential threat from a rapidly changing world. To them, modernity appeared not as progress, but as erosion, an unstoppable force dissolving tradition, hierarchy, and divine authority. The heart of the confrontation was Castelfidardo. On the 18th of September 1860, these two worldviews collided without mediation or compromise. The encounter was brief, yet decisive. The setbacks suffered by the papal forces extinguished any remaining hope of resisting in open field and cleared the path toward the final act of the campaign, the siege of Ancona.
The culmination of this phase took place near Castelfidardo and later in the city of Ancona, where these different visions came into close contact. The coordination between land forces and maritime units led to the final definition of new balances. A significant technical event at the defensive structures of Ancona on September 29th marked the formal conclusion of an era. This led to the integration of the marches into the emerging national context. It was a moment of transition that marked the point of no return toward the political framework we recognize today. The fall of the old administration in this coastal stronghold was not just a local event, but a signal to the rest of the world that a new era had arrived. This transition was the final piece of a complex puzzle that reshaped the map of the Mediterranean.
Yet behind the maneuvers, beyond the official reports and carefully drawn maps, there were people. Staff officers calculating movements and supply lines, battalion commanders holding fragile positions, engineers shaping the battlefield with roads and fortifications, gunners maintaining their posts under constant strain, sailors advancing along hostile coastlines. And there were also those on the losing side, generals, foreign volunteers, and ordinary soldiers who had bound their future to a vision of the world that was rapidly fading. This work retraces those individual paths one by one, not to glorify or to denounce, but to understand. Through personal biographies, the complexity of an event emerges, an event far too intricate to be reduced to a single episode of the Risorgimento. The campaign of 1860 was more than a military success. It represented the point of no return in a crisis, centuries in the making, anticipated by humanist critiques of the donation of Constantine, and fully matured in the long struggle between spiritual authority and modern political sovereignty. It was the moment when armed force rendered irreversible what intellectual history had already prepared. To tell the story of these men is to restore human depth to a transformation of historic magnitude. Every name, every uniform, every individual who did not return carried within him a worldview, a loyalty, a hope. Only by following these lives patiently and individually can we truly understand how Italy came into being and what human cost accompanied the end of a millennial order. It was not only armies that moved in September 1860. It was people. people divided by language, education, faith and ambition, yet united by having been drawn into the same brief and intense vortex of history. The Umbria and Marche campaign was a conflict of names before it was a conflict of units. Within the Sardinian ranks advanced career officers hardened by years of warfare. Many had already fought in 1848, 1849, in the Crimean War and in 1859. They were professionals, shaped by military academies and staff training, for whom war was a discipline governed by timing, distance, logistics, and communication. Figures such as Manfredo Fanti, the architect of the campaign, and Enrico Cialdini, a swift and uncompromising strategist, embodied a new concept of command, rational, coordinated, and distinctly modern. Around them operated staff officers destined to become the administrative and political elite of the new kingdom, men who would soon exchange the battlefield for ministries, parliamentary chambers, and the Senate. Victory, however, was not achieved by bayonets alone. It was secured by engineers who carved roads overnight, by artillery units that positioned batteries under sustained pressure, by telegraph operators who stretched wires across hills and valleys, transforming information into a decisive strategic tool. With them, modernity entered warfare not as an idea, but as a concrete operational reality. On the opposing side, the supporters of Pius IX formed an army without a territorial homeland, yet bound together by an ideal one. French aristocrats stood beside Irish farmers, Swiss professionals beside young Belgian volunteers. They had left their homes not for material reward, but out of conviction. For many, defending the papal state meant defending the final stronghold of a world ordered according to divine principles. Figures such as Georges de Pomodan, who fell at Castelfidardo, were immediately elevated as symbols of dedication and moral steadfastness in Catholic circles across Europe. Their passing was interpreted not as defeat, but as an ultimate commitment to faith. Alongside the prominent commanders stood countless individuals without voice or recognition, captains holding untenable positions, battalions resisting for hours against superior forces, gunners remaining at their posts until the very end, sailors advancing under fire from coastal fortifications. The campaign of 1860 was also a confrontation of consciences. Many papal officers understood the fragility of their cause. Many Sardinian officers recognized they were facing opponents guided by sincere beliefs. In more than one instance, respect between adversaries outweighed political hostility. These men were not background figures in an abstract historical process. They were the tangible agents of choice. Each embodied a fault line of 19th century Europe, between faith and secular order, between empire and nation, between inherited tradition and emerging modernity. To recount the campaign through their lives is to restore depth to an episode often reduced to a handful of dates and a single place name, Castelfidardo. It is to acknowledge that Italy was born also through confrontation, sometimes painful, between individuals who each believed themselves to be acting rightly. When the guns finally fell silent at Ancona, what remained were not only victors and defeated, but interrupted lives, newly forged careers, broken expectations, and memories destined either for legend or for silence. In these individuals, more than in banners or proclamations, the true face of the 1860 campaign can be read. The men of Castelfidardo and the war campaign in Umbria and the Marche, lives, arms and destinies in the 1860 expedition and in the end of temporal power. The volume is available on Amazon and is intended for scholars, enthusiasts of Risorgimento history, and readers interested in a narrative that combines military analysis, biography, and cultural context. Leave a like or a comment. Your feedback is essential to give visibility to the work and to continue enhancing the historical memory of the territories and their protagonists.